It's June 5th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the Korea-Africa Summit. South Korea and African states have agreed to build up their cooperation in essential fields, including key minerals. And today, the leaders will continue to explore their collaboration in the field of economy. The 2018 Inter-Korea military agreement that was signed to defuse military tensions at the border is now suspended in response to mounting provocations coming from the north. Military activities along the border can now take place at any time. And U.S. President Joe Biden says the North's security challenge is equally as threatening as it was before when asked if North Korea is getting more provocative, referring to whether North Korea issues were worse during the Trump administration. The second and last day of the Korea-Africa Summit today will stretch out to a grand-scale economic event. Major government officials and business leaders from the two sides will gather for a business summit. Let's turn to our Choi Min-jung for details. Min-jung.
Dami, it's day 2 of the Korea-Africa Summit, and as you said, soon leaders and delegations from South Korea and Africa will be participating in the business summit hosted by South Korea's Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy. President Yoon and President of Mauritania and Chairperson of the African Union, Mohamed Ould Ghazouani, will deliver keynote speeches at the opening ceremony. African heads of state, major government officials, business leaders, and economic experts will also be there to discuss agenda items such as industrial development, trade expansion, food and mineral security, and climate change, all of which are mutual interest to both Korea and Africa. Business leaders from Korea's Hyundai Motor Group, LG Global Strategy Center, POSCO Research Institute, and Tucson Enerbility will also be attending. Now, on the sidelines of the event, there will be the signing of MOUs between major economic organizations of South Korea and Africa, including the establishment of a Korea-Africa Economic Committee. The aim is to enhance Korea-Africa economic cooperation and create a robust framework for business initiatives.
Right, Min-jung, and besides the significant business summit, we hear there are more side events on Korea-Africa partnerships taking place today as well. Tell us more about that.
That's right, Dami. There are several side events scheduled throughout the day. South Korea's Foreign Ministry and the Korea International Cooperation Agency will host a Korea-Africa Future Partnership Conference focusing on development cooperation strategy for empowering future generations. There will also be forums on youth startups, infrastructure, as well as agriculture. These events are hosted by Korean government ministries and organizations and will be attended by delegations from multiple African nations. This is all I have for now, but I'll be back with more updates in our later newscast. Back to you, Dami.
All right, Min-jung, thank you for the coverage. And also, President Yoon discussed ways to strengthen mineral cooperation and development assistance with leaders of 4 African countries on the sidelines of the Korea-Africa Summit on Tuesday. In a bilateral meeting with Madagascan leader Andrea Rajoelina, Yoon discussed the two countries' cooperation in core minerals and agreed on strengthening Korea's assistance in cultivating high-quality rice. Meeting with Kenyan President William Ruto, Yoon said he hopes to expand cooperation in infrastructure and food security, while agreeing to start talks on signing an economic partnership agreement and complete the construction of a Kenyan Institute of Science. Yoon also reviewed bilateral trade and investment ties with Ghana, with his counterpart requesting Korea play a bigger role in infrastructure projects. The South Korean leader also met with the president of Liberia and discussed economic and democratic growth. On Wednesday, the Yoon will hold bilateral meetings with the leaders of Mauritania, Equatorial Guinea, Comoro, Botswana, Eswatini, Central African Republic, and the Seychelles. He will also meet the chairman of the African Union Commission. So yesterday, on day 1 of the summit, the leaders discussed their vision of shared growth, sustainability, and solidarity. And they agreed to expand cooperation in many fields, including key minerals. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young has the details.
South Korea and African nations have agreed to establish a critical minerals dialogue and increase cooperation on infrastructure, digital technology and food security. This came in a joint statement following South Korea's first standalone summit with African countries on Tuesday, attended by 48 member states of the African Union. President Yoon and African Union Chair President Mohamed El Ghazouani of Mauritania highlighted the 7 major areas of cooperation under the theme of shared growth, sustainability and solidarity.
한 아프리카 관계의 새로운 장을 열게 된 오늘 회의에서 참석자들은 함께 만드는 미래를 위한 구체적 방안들을 심도 있게 논의했습니다.
We all understand that Korea can offer a lot, especially when it comes to the experience of development, human capital development, and transition to digital economy. In these ways, we have a lot to learn, and we were able to learn the growth potential of Africa.
First, to promote trade and investment, the two sides agreed to pursue an economic partnership agreement and a trade and investment promotion framework to promote more corporate exchanges. Seoul will also aim to expand its official development assistance to Africa to $10 billion by 2030 and provide some $14 billion of financing for Korean companies to tap into the market of some 1.4 billion people. South Korea and Africa also signed MOUs on building infrastructure, including roads, rails and ports, and increasing the digital capacity of African youth through educational and vocational programs. They also penned deals to strengthen cooperation on food security, sustainable farming and health infrastructure. And one key deal they struck was to establish a dialogue channel on critical minerals, which are core components for advanced digital products like semiconductors, South Korea's main export. As of 2022, South Korea has only 36 mineral mines to back the sector, compared to the United States' more than 1,900 and Japan's 134, according to the Federation of Korean Industries. Amid various regional and global challenges to peace and security, the two sides agreed to increase cooperation in counter-terrorism and humanitarian support, as well as their solidarity at the UN Security Council, where South Korea and 3 African countries are serving non-permanent terms. Also, the two sides emphasized the international community's push for the complete, verifiable and irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. To further develop their cooperation, they agreed to increase bilateral exchanges between governments and businesses, as well as in culture, sports and academia. To ensure continuity of their agreements, South Korea and Africa will hold a foreign ministers meeting in 2 years' time and establish high-level consultative bodies on economic cooperation and agriculture.
Marking a new chapter in Korea-Africa cooperation, the summit creates an intersection between Korea's vision of becoming a global pivotal state, a responsible contributor to world peace and prosperity, and Agenda 2063, Africa's blueprint for sustainable development with the goal of becoming a global powerhouse. 오수영, Arirang News.
And diplomatic and economic exchanges between South Korean and African nations will go way back from the Korean War to independence days for African states. Hopes are high that the summit will further solidify their lasting friendship. Our Kim Do-yeon tells us more.
At the first Korea-Africa summit, with 48 African nations represented in South Korea, President Yoon opened what he called a new chapter of friendship, saying that this summit confirms African nations as critical partners of South Korea, while noting that the two sides have been there for each other during tough times.
1950년 6.25 전쟁이 발발하자 아프리카는 파병과 물자 지원을 통해 대한민국의 자유민주주의 수호에 기여해 주었습니다. 1950년대부터 70년대까지 많은 아프리카 국가들이 차례로 독립을 이룩하면서 우리와의 수교는 더 활발히 이루어졌습니다.
He also noted that the summit opens a new chapter in relations. African Union Chair and Mauritania's President Mohamed El Ghazouani opened the response from African nations, showing his hope for enhanced cooperation.
I believe that the very reason African nations are attending this summit is because African countries are expressing their steadfast trust and gratitude towards South Korea.
Rwandan President Paul Kagame said, quote, "South Korea is a global pivotal state. Africa is a global pivotal continent. This summit should have happened sooner." South Korea needs to share its experience of success, while Africa has a lot of must-learns from South Korea. And the Central African Republic president said, "We request South Korea to develop human resources for the conservation and development of Africa's vast forests. We hope for mutual growth between Korea and Africa through decarbonization." This two-day event was held just outside of Seoul in Goyang, Gyeonggi-do province at Kintex, the largest exhibition facility in South Korea. This is the biggest multilateral summit that the Yoon administration has hosted. It was much anticipated after President Yoon himself announced the plan to host the inaugural summit back in late 2022. With a number of participants, just the welcoming and greeting of all leaders took more than an hour in the morning. Covering the summit were reporters from all around the world, with different languages being heard at the media center to show the diversity this summit comes with. Following the morning session, the leaders gathered for a photo shoot, lunch, closing ceremony, and the joint press conference. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And it wasn't just the leaders. Media outlets from several different African countries also showed great interest in the possible outcomes from the two-day summit. Our Park Kwon-woo talked to them.
I'm here on the first day of the historic 2024 Korea-Africa Summit held here in Korea. The event not only drew attention domestically, but also from dozens of media outlets in Africa. Let's get their take on the event.
Us creating a relation in terms of probably exchange, trade, and also in terms of companies, Korean companies setting up in Africa, and especially in Eswatini, so that we can benefit in terms of creating jobs and obviously innovation and things like that.
He added the combination of Korea's advanced technology and Eswatini's various mineral resources could help their country develop. A media representative from Malawi also shared the same sentiment, but mentioned potential cooperation in tourism and agriculture.
And another aspect is tourism. Our country is looking forward to have as many tourists as possible coming from different countries, including Korea. Most of our farmers are still using the traditional ways of farming, advanced equipment like tractors that we know for sure that Korea does have these kind of modern equipment, agricultural equipment. So we are looking forward into those aspects of saying that Korea can help us to invest in these sectors of agriculture.
He added that the Korea-Africa Summit should act as a place where real deals between Korea and African countries actually are promoted. Park Kwon-woo, Arirang News.
First Lady Kim Gun-hee emphasized cultural and social solidarity between Korea and Africa as she hosted the spouses of leaders attending the two-day multilateral summit. On Tuesday, Kim held a cultural program and luncheon at the Presidential Palace of Cheongwade for her counterparts from 13 African nations, including Mauritania, Eswatini, Mozambique, Madagascar, and Kenya. Kim noted the cultural and emotional similarities between Korea and Africa, given their experience of overcoming war and colonial rule. She highlighted the influence of Africa's primitive arts on modern artists, including expressionist abstract arts, as an example of how Africa has the potential to become the center of global economic and cultural development. The First Lady of Sierra Leone, Fatima Jabebio, requested support in campaigning against sexual violence and against women and child marriages, to which Kim said she sympathized and would actively consider ways that she could cooperate. Leaders of South Korea and African states agreed to launch a high-level dialogue on expanding cooperation on the supply chain of critical minerals. Let's discuss why this is a huge step with Professor Choi Bin. Welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you here. You're welcome.
Why such a pledge on the supply chain of critical minerals? Why is it so important?
Africa holds 30% of the world mineral reserve. Many of them are critical to renewable and low carbon technologies, including solar, electric vehicles, and battery storage, and green hydrogen. Korea has most advanced technologies on those industrial sectors. Competition for access to the African continent, critical minerals will increase dramatically, placing Africa at the heart of the green energy future. So expanding cooperation on the supply chain of the critical mineral between South Korea and African states should ensure that both parties benefit equally from collaborative efforts. Over the past 30 years, the economic relationship between the two sides has experienced significant growth. Notably, leading Korean companies have made substantial investment in various cooperation projects across African countries, particularly in sectors like construction, energy, and critical minerals. As African development journey advanced and the developmental partnership between Korea and Africa evolved, I hold a strong belief that investment in Africa will naturally flourish, propelled by the collaborative effort between the private and public sectors.
So there's no better partner when it comes to securing the supply chain of key minerals. And the leaders couldn't stress enough how crucial it is to promote people-to-people exchanges as part of their efforts to, tighten solidarity. How can they do that?
Actually, we have a K-culture or K-dramas, and Africa has the Nollywood, which refers to the Nigerian film industry. It has been very popular among ordinary Africans. So cultural exchange can boost solidarity between Koreans and the peoples in Africa. Also, leveraging Korea's expertise in education and vocational training, alongside Africa's abundant youth population, present a significant opportunity for Africa's capacity buildings and skill development initiatives, empowering its youth and driving economic growth. Korea is also welcoming students coming from many African countries. The Global Korea Scholarship, called GKS, provides the opportunity to study at the higher education institution in Korea, both undergraduate and graduate level. In 2022, there were about 600 African students in Korea, of which 82 were under GKS. Since the 2024 summit, Korea will offer more GKS to African students.
Well, Professor Jo, I have to ask you, is there any particular country that has, lots to share and offer South Korea, or a country that you think has lots of potential to become a good partner of Seoul?
Actually, it is not easy for me to pick only one African country that has a lot to share and offer South Korea. I'd like to think Ghana has lots of the potential to become a good partner of Seoul. The Republic of Ghana is a country in West Africa. Ghana is a unitary constitutional democracy. It has maintained one of the freest and most stable governments on the continent. It performed relatively well in healthcare, economic growth, and human development. In turn, Ghana has a significant influence in West Africa and Africa as a whole. Ghana produces high-quality cocoa. I think Koreans like the chocolates. It is classified as a mineral income country. Ghana has an increasing primary manufacturing economy and export of the digital technology goods, along with the assembling and exporting automobiles and ships, diverse resource-rich exportations of industrial minerals, agricultural products, primary cocoa I mentioned earlier, petroleum, and natural gas. And as of 2019, Ghana was the 7th largest producer of the gold in the world. So it has a lot of potential.
Lots to offer. Now, before I let you go, Professor Jo, let's talk about the opening remarks given by President Yoon yesterday. He stressed Korea-Africa security cooperation for keeping peace on the Korean Peninsula and Africa, especially in light of heightening tensions and provocations coming from the north. How can Africa play a constructive role here?
Actually, 54 African countries are members of the UN, and 3 of them are the elected member of the UN Security Council. As a member of the Council from 2024 to 2025, Korea is committed to contributing to fulfilling the Council's duty of maintaining international peace and security. In order for us to take the lead in the shaping discussions on the peace and security on the Korean Peninsula, as well as around the world, we need support from African countries. Korea aspires to become a global people state, which actively harnesses Korea's growing, strengthening, and capability in advancing freedom, peace, and prosperity in the international community. So we recognize the importance of the supporting African leadership and ownership in securing sustainable peace in Africa. Korea is committed to strengthening the capacity of the African Union and sub-regional organizations. The Korean government has contributed over $18 million since 2016 to support the AU peace and security activities. In addition, Korea has been actively participating in the AU-UN Group of Friends in enhancing cooperation, coordination on the African issues, both at the AU and the UN.
All right, Professor Joe, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
South Korea has officially scrapped the entirety of the 2018 Inter-Korean Military Agreement. Seoul's military held the North Korean regime and its repeated provocations responsible for the suspension. Our North Korean Affairs correspondent Kim Jung-sil reports.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has signed the motion that was passed by the cabinet meeting on Tuesday morning to suspend all clauses of the 2018 Inter-Korean Military Agreement.
The government has decided to suspend all effectiveness of the September 19th military agreement until mutual trust between the two Koreas is restored, effective Tuesday, June 4th, as of 3 p.m., after the decision of the cabinet and the president's approval.
The 2018 Inter-Korean Military Agreement was aimed at diffusing military tensions and preventing accidental military conflict at the border. But military officials, including South Korea's defense minister, have argued that the agreement compromises South Korean military readiness.
Since signing the agreement, North Korea has deliberately and repeatedly conducted violations and provocations, including firing artillery shells off the coast, firing missiles beyond the NLL, firing at guard posts, and infiltrating with small unmanned aerial vehicles.
Back in November, North Korea declared a virtual termination of the September 19 military agreement. This came after Seoul partially suspended a clause on aerial reconnaissance following North Korea's launch of a military spy satellite the night before.
Despite North Korea's repeated violations and provocations, our military has continued to abide by the agreement. However, since failing to launch the military reconnaissance satellites back on May 27th, the North has launched missiles, sent large-scale balloons carrying waste, and jammed GPS systems, gravely threatening the safety of our people and causing property damage.
The deputy minister added that the North Korean regime is solely responsible for the turn of events and warned of a firm response should the North engage in further provocations. With the suspension in effect, the deputy minister hinted of the possible resumption of military drills near the military demarcation line and the Northwest Islands. Such drills had been restricted by the agreement. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
U.S. President Joe Biden in a recent interview said that the nuclear situation in North Korea is equally as threatening as before, and that nuclear weapons, as long as they are available, will always be problematic. Our Lee Si-hoo has the details.
U.S. President Joe Biden, in an interview with Time magazine last week, said that North Korea's nuclear program is equally as threatening as it was before. When asked whether the situation was getting worse, he added he does not think it's more threatening. The president said that, quote, as long as there are nuclear weapons available, it's always going to be a problem, adding that former U.S. President Donald Trump was wrong in not wanting to work early on 5 years ago. When asked if it's American policy to live with a nuclear or near-nuclear Iran and North Korea, Biden confirmed that it isn't. President Biden further mentioned his visit to South Korea, quote, to reclaim the chips industry, and said the U.S. has secured $865 billion in private sector investments during his presidency. The interview took place at the White House on May 28th, where Biden spoke extensively about his foreign policy agenda. Its full transcript was released on Tuesday. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Hello, I'm Lee Ji-young with the latest weather updates. If you felt too warm yesterday, you need to brace for a scorcher. Especially those of us in the capital area should notice a bigger jump in highs to 31 degrees Celsius this afternoon, feeling more like early August under strong sunshine. However, due to the rapid rise in highs, we have some passing rain in the forecast for Gangwon-do and Chungcheong-pukdo, as well as Jeollado provinces, along with thunderstorms during the day. It's Mangjong today, the third summer season term out of 6, and temperatures prove it. Meanwhile, Jeju Island will have comfortable temperatures under partly sunny skies this afternoon. Sweltering weather continues tomorrow, which is Memorial Day here in Korea. Then nationwide rain is in the forecast this weekend. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow, on Friday at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.